pop the trunk for me. Okay. Go ahead and put that paper off to the side for me. Go ahead and step out for me. Don't fucking move! Don't fucking move!
All right, attention armed citizens. The United States Supreme Court has just changed the law on when a police officer can use deadly force against a citizen. What does that mean for you? I'm going to quickly break down this case and give you 4 simple life-saving rules so that you can not only survive, but win the counter with law enforcement. So guys, let's get into it. All right, the case we're talking about is from the United States Supreme Court, so it applies to everyone, everywhere in the United States. It's called Barnes v. Felix. It's from 2025. What we're talking about are 2 concepts. We're talking about, on the one hand, something called moment of threat, and on the other hand, we're talking about totality of the circumstances. Moment of threat is what is out. The Supreme Court ruled that you cannot just look when determining whether or not the use of force by a police officer was lawful or unlawful, whether it was legal or excessive. You cannot just look only at the moment that the shooting took place and what immediately within a few moments preceded it. Instead, what the United States Supreme Court said is that you have to look at everything that preceded it, because maybe that moment of what the suspect did, what that citizen was doing, whether the driver, whatever, you name it, whatever they did, maybe would look very different. And as a result, maybe the officer should not have pulled the trigger if we look at the totality of the circumstances to understand what was going on. So what happened? Well, really quickly in the Barnes case, you already saw it in the open. We're going to roll it again for you in just a moment. But Barnes was pulled over by Officer Felix, and there was some initial exchanges at the window side. Barnes actually popped his trunk at the request of Officer Felix and also turned off his car. Felix came back, noticed the smell of marijuana coming from the car, and Barnes, I guess, was acting a little unusual. He was reaching around, he's making furtive movements. And then what happened next? Well, that's going to unfortunately end one life and probably define another. Barnes decided to start his car and try to drive away, and Officer Felix decided to try to get into that window. When Barnes kept driving, Officer Felix believed that he was in imminent threat of death or great bodily harm, stuck his service firearm into the car and pulled the trigger a few times.
Sure, go ahead and pop the trunk for me. Okay. Go ahead and put that paper off to the side for me. Go ahead and step out for me. Don't fucking move! Don't fucking move!
So the question is, what does this mean for the armed American? What does this mean for the person who's concealed carrying, they're constitutional carrying, they're open carrying, they're you name it, but they have a firearm that's in the car, in the passenger cabin, in the trunk, you name it. What do you need to know? Well, very importantly, before I get to my 4 rules that you need to know, I'm just going to throw out a quick quote about why the Supreme Court changed this. And the quote's not coming from me, it's coming from the United States Supreme Court. And when you're talking about a quote from the Supreme Court in a 9-0 decision, that's always something to pay attention to. So why did the Supreme Court change this? In the court's own words, they said this about lower courts reviewing officer deadly shooting cases just like this one. Quote, so for example, they, meaning lower courts, could not consider the reasons for the stop or the earlier interactions between the suspect and officer. And because of that limit, they could not address whether the final 2 seconds of the encounter would look different if set within a longer time frame, end quote. In other words, that last sentence on the page you were just reading might read very differently if you had read the entire page, chapter, or book before it. Because context, what we in law call the totality of the circumstances, that stuff's really important and it matters. And no, by the way, this is not some sort of total constitutional rewrite or anything like that. In this decision, they cited to a 1995 case from 30 years ago. That feels strange to say. Tennessee versus Garner. In that case, the court wrote, quote, the Fourth Amendment forbids deadly force against a fleeing suspect unless they pose a significant threat of death or serious physical harm, end quote. So just because someone's fleeing because of their library fines and they have no apparent threat to another person doesn't mean that officer can go ahead and pull out Dr. 12 gauge and start writing prescriptions. A little too soon for that. We need something to be able to have the officer argue that our serial library theft person, I don't know, was a significant threat of death or serious physical harm to another person. So within the 4 rules, I'm going to teach you the 3 big things that the court ruled on here as being the 3 driving factors that the court is instructing lower courts to focus on when they're determining the lawful use of force, and as a result, are informing and setting up our 4 rules for carry and navigating surviving traffic stops with law enforcement. Rule number 1, stop moving. No, don't slam the brakes on your car and stop in the middle of traffic. What I mean by stop moving is this. If you're driving like this, keep driving like this. Don't start reaching over to the glove box, the center console, underneath your seat, even if that's where your purse, your wallet, your backpack with your license, proof of registration, auto insurance, you name it. Leave that to the side for now, because the officers are trained observers and they are looking to see what you're going to do in response to their traffic lights. So keep this in mind. They do not know what you are doing. Officers are trained in the academy that making traffic stops is one of, if not the most deadly things that they have to do on their job. And by the statistics, that is 100% correct. Nearly 20% of all officer line of duty deaths each year in the United States come from traffic stops. They don't know who you are. They don't know what you're capable of, and they certainly don't know what kind of day you're having until they start talking to you. So why amp up their heart rate and blood pressure while risking dropping yours to 0 by starting to reach for things? They don't know if you're going for some sort of weapon and what you're going to be doing with it. That's how bad things happen, whether potentially justified or not. Bringing this back to Barnes, one of the 3 things that the Supreme Court cited as particularly being important when we're talking about the totality of the circumstances is that the actions that the officer took during the stop, such as giving commands, warnings, hey, stop moving, get on the ground, ordering you to stop coming at them, drop the gun, things like that, hopefully reasonably common sense things. Your failure to comply with those, among a lot of other issues, that's absolutely going to be a key and crucial point in determining whether the use of force against you or another person was lawful at the time. Rule 2, you're looking to close the information gap. What am I talking about? You're getting pulled over. Maybe you know why you're getting pulled over. This is especially true for you heavy-footed speeders out there, but maybe you don't. And in any event, just because you were speeding doesn't mean that that's exactly the reason why they pulled you over. When pulled over, try to learn why. Now, some of this you can pick up just based off of body language, how they walk up to your car, you name it. Believe me, you will know if you're in what we call a felony traffic stop. You pull over, their firearms immediately come out, all right? You cannot control what the officer thinks happened, what they believe you did or did not do, but you can work to de-escalate that situation. Your mission right now is not to win an argument. Men and women with guns pointed at you is not an argument. It's potentially a life or death situation. Your mission is very simple. Survive this encounter, and the Lord willing, go home to your family. If law enforcement treat you like this is a high-risk felony stop, as if you just killed someone, now is not the time to argue. Now is the time to go along with this. Take your cues by closing the information gap about what is this stop going to be about, how is it going to be going, and then you can start to mirror some of that language back, but always in a polite, respectful way by following their commands. So case in point, you're not going to act the same way on a felony stop where all the guns are out, they're barking commands through a microphone, you name it, versus just kind of an ordinary traffic stop, right? Right. So intuitively, implicitly, there's going to be a lot of mirroring going on here, and that's very important. You unconsciously do this as a survival mechanism. Now is not the time to end your family's evolutionary tree. So going back to the Supreme Court case in Barnes, the Supreme Court ruled that the severity of the crime of what prompted the stop, in other words, murder 1 versus burned out taillight, is one of the factors that courts will consider when we're looking at the use of force. Why? Because that feeds back into what the officer thinks that they know. So that kind of stuff, that headwaters information is extremely important, And that's part of the reason why you need to understand what kind of environment am I operating in? Is this the felony stop or is this the parking ticket? Rule 3, permission mode. Your hands start on your steering wheel, and if you can, the window is lowered to talk with the officers when they walk up. That way you don't have to reach down and fumble with the controls or something like that, because to an officer, they don't know if you're reaching down to get something else, like a firearm, a knife, you name it. When the officer arrives at your window and asks for a license, insurance, and whatever else, be sure to ask for permission to reach into your coat, your jacket, your pants pocket, glove box, purse, backpack, wherever it is that these things are in order to comply. Because remember, you didn't go for this while you were pulling over. You didn't go for this while they had you stopped and you're running your registration, who the possible owners are, all that kind of stuff. Because that's what we like to call furtive movements in the justice system. What's a furtive movement? Well, I'm on camera right now. I'm gonna ask my camera guy, Derek, zoom out. Those are furtive movements. You see me going down under the table doing stuff. You don't know what I'm doing. You don't know what I'm going after. Neither does the officer, right? All they know is that when that hand comes back up, I might be in trouble, right? So slip into permission mode. Officer, I need to get my license, registration, and proof of insurance. One of those is in the glove box. The other two are right here in the center console. I'm gonna open this up and reach into that slowly if you don't mind, and then listen for their command back. Now remember, if the officer is having a good day, if they're a good professional, you are going to get usually whatever you're giving. So that mirroring goes two ways. If you're polite and respectful, hopefully most of the time they will be too. But never, ever make rapid, sudden movements to go underneath the seat, someplace where they cannot see you, especially if it's dark and night out. That's how you get cool new speed holes that are 9mm wide. And let's bring this back to the Supreme Court decision once again, that, by the way, is attached in the description box down below, the Barnes decision. The third thing that the Supreme Court highlighted as being especially important when we're talking about whether the officer's use of force was lawful was the stopped person's conduct. In other words, are you being aggressive, erratic? Are you armed? Are you posing a threat to another person? Now, if you're watching this video, there's a good chance that you're armed, which is the reason why you're going to want to stay tuned for rule number 4. Rule number 4, know the law. So the attorney was telling you to do anything and everything that the cops told you, right? No, not really at all. This is where education kicks in. You need to know your rights. You need to be educated on what you can and cannot do, and for that matter, what you choose to do with those rights. If you choose to use them, great. If you don't, fine. But don't invent rights or misunderstand rights and then try to roll with it, because trust me, it's not going to work out too well for you. So people are always saying, know your rights. I say, know your rights, but use them effectively. Case in point, yelling, I know my rights, while throwing empty Busch Light cans at the officer through an open window isn't a smart move. It might make hilarious body camera footage. Please, someone link that up in the comment box if you got it. And everyone at the police department will be watching that on loop at their station Christmas party. But trust me, this is an exceptionally poor legal strategy. Let's be clear. Unless there's something crazy going on here, you do not need to hand them your cell phone. Give them your email, password, your social media login credentials. You don't need to offer to let them search your car or anything else, okay? Again, subject to whatever's going on, that's not legal advice. No one is suggesting that you just roll over and consent to anything and everything all the time. Understand that cops are allowed to lie to you about almost everything in order to gain your consent. It is up to you to know where your rights start and where they can end, because keep in mind, on Fourth Amendment, you are free from any unreasonable searches and seizures, which means you are not free from reasonable searches and seizures, right? Where does that line between unreasonable and reasonable fall? Well, this is where you have to know the law. Also keep in mind that even if you are dead set in your knowledge and you actually turn out to be 100% true, 100% accurate, that the officer is violating your rights by performing an illegal search, guess what? I have not met a state, maybe it's out there. If it is, someone please let me know about it in the comment section, but I've not met a state where if you resist an illegal stop, an illegal search, an illegal arrest, if you resist one of those illegal things, that is legal. Instead, you will be charged with obstruction of justice, resisting obstructing, whatever it is that they call it wherever you are. So the important thing is, look, you're going along for the ride. The officer is in control. Be polite, be respectful, but again, understand how to raise your rights. And if the officer doesn't want to listen to you, if they're going to play it by their rules and not the Constitution, look, that could be hopefully a dandy of a lawsuit down the road. But don't put yourself in orange behind bars because you chose to take a principled stand in that moment. Principled stands will come later with a lawyer in court and hopefully you getting a check at the end of the day. But there's a reason why I call rule number 4, know the law, not know your rights. Why? Because in some states, it may be a crime if you're carrying a firearm and you fail to disclose it. Now, if you're in a state like that, you need to know that law, regardless of whether or not you choose to comply with it, because we want informed decisions from behind the wheel, not excuses sitting next to an attorney in a courtroom. Something that you should never do that could make things really go poorly is if you're glove box carrying and if you have your registration in the glove box, because what happens? You're going to need to get that registration out as part of the stop. And suddenly we've got you reaching for the surprise firearm. Not a good way to spend a day, an evening, or, a year convalescing in the hospital. So you want to know what the great thing is about that? As an example, you can plan that right now because guess what? Because if you are carrying a firearm in your car, maybe it's a spare, I don't know. I will remind you that over 50% of firearms that are stolen from automobiles, but I'm not making a point about that. We're leaving that here, and I'm definitely not going to be thinking about this after the camera goes off. Is that the place where you want to keep your proof of insurance and registration right next to that loaded firearm? Probably not. Maybe one for the center console, one for the glove box, right? Right? We can agree on that? All right, get it done. If you do choose to let the officer know that there is a firearm in the car, maybe it is that glove box carry. Maybe you do need to go there because I've had that happen to me personally once. What I told the officer was very clear. Officer, my proof of insurance and my registration is in the glove box. There is a firearm in the glove box. What do you want me to do? And when I told him that, my hands were open and on the steering wheel. Open hands on the steering wheel oftentimes can be an indication that it's a quiet cop code that there's a firearm that's in the car. Not everybody follows that, but I've heard that many, many times over the years. In my case, the officer said, look, you slowly go for the paperwork and everything's going to be just fine. And it was. But the key part was that I obviously did not play the old surprise firearm falling out of the glove box and me reaching for it. And you shouldn't either. Always be calm if you're telling law enforcement about a firearm that's in the vehicle, especially if it's something that's within reach or access to you. That certainly includes it if it's on your hip, on your waist, in your center glove box, you name it. Use a clear, calm tone. Something like, officer, I'm lawfully carrying a handgun that is at my 5 o'clock position on my waist. How do you want me to proceed? Very simple. There's no reason to be confrontational about this. If you have a reasonable officer back, they will walk you through what they want you to do and just do it. It's really that simple. Now, what happens if you get a really aggressive cop and things start to go downhill? Repeat the rules. Re-loop them. It's really that simple. Stop moving. If you've got an aggressive cop that's screaming at you with a gun in your face, stop moving. Close the information gap in your head about what's going on. And then if they're telling you, do this, get on the ground slowly, turn around, whatever it is, do it. You're following the 4 rules again. You're going through stop moving, close the information gap, permission mode, know the law. It's really that simple. Let me know in the comment section down below how you have handled similar interactions with law enforcement officers when you've been carrying, when you're out on the road, you name it, down in the discussion field below. I'm curious to hear about it. I appreciate you all, as always, for stopping by. We're going to close out with our ever popular quote of the day. This one comes from noted Roman thinker philosopher Seneca, who said, quote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." That rings true to me. What about you? Appreciate you sticking around again. I'll see you next time. Take care. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, please feel free to check out some of our other great content, and we'll see you in the next one.